Good evening, this is Snakebear, and tonight I'm bringing you a fight between the Vampire Counts and Bordeleaux. I lead the Vampire Counts versus the forces of All Might. As for army compositions, my army is being led by Vlad von Karstein, and I brought Race Dead and Invocation of Nehek and both of his quest items. I also have a single White King on a horse. My main line consists of 2 Graveguards and the Sternsmen. They are being supported by 2 Crypt Horrors, and on each flank I have 2 Skeleton Spearmen. I also have 2 units of Blood Knights on my flanks. As for the forces of Bordeleaux, they're being led by Albric de Bordeleaux himself. He is on a horse and he has his abilities, but he does not have his trident. All Might also brought a Damsel of Life on a horse and with Earthblood and Regrowth. As for his main line, it consists of 4 units of Spearmen at Arms with shields. His flanks consist of 2 men at arms with polearms, and he has 3 units of Foot Squires in support. He also has a rear guard of 2 Grail Guardians, and then as a flanking force he has a single unit of Grail Knights. I must say, though, that All Might fell into the trap that all the Bretonnian factions usually fall into. When you face a Bretonnian faction, you generally assume that they will bring a pretty strong cav component and a pretty wide infantry line. The weakness here is their leadership. You really need to bring that Grail Relic to be able to maintain that infantry line. And we will see how this goes. The first thing I do notice is that he has a pretty wide infantry line, but I do know that my units are superior to his, so I'm going to eat through at least parts of this main line. And by this time I do notice that he has only 1 Grail Knight visible, and my plan here is to actually gang up on him with both of my Blood Knights. So I'm going to move both of them over here to do some tandem action versus his Grail Knights. He is repositioning his Grail Guardians, but I'm really not that worried because he can't really get to any vulnerable units because I don't have any vulnerable units. And here he actually does me a favor. I mean, I don't want my Crypt Horrors in melee against spears, and he has kept his Foot Squires in reserves. But here, when he charges in with his Grail Guardians, he just gave me a new juicy target for my Crypt Horrors. So that's actually for my benefit. And here, I am sacrificing one of my Blood Knights. I am letting them take the charge, because the first thing I do is immediately rear charge it and lock it into melee. Very short, very brutal fight. Back to the main engagement. He is keeping his Lord and Hero very far back here, and this is the result. We have an almost immediate leadership rout. He does realize this, so he's sending his Lords and Heroes back in support. And here another Earthblood goes off, or my first Earthblood goes off just to keep my main line healthy. He does heal his own line with an Earthblood, but his life magic can't really compete to my necromancy. I mean, any lost models will stay dead for him, while mine will return. I've already wasted his Grail Knights. He did try to support them with polearms, but I'm just outmaneuvering them. And now I'm just doing some additional hit point damage on this poor unit before I decide to try to cycle charge his rear. As for his flanks, he has a Spearman over here and a polearm over here, and I'm just keeping them contained with my Spearman, because since all of his cav is either dead or locked into melee, my Spearman really has no better use, so I'm just keeping their units contained. Another Earthblood goes off. Oh, here we will see another reason why to bring the Grail Relic. Look here. That was 1 second in base contact with the polearm unit, and they just shatter. They're still at half health, but they just shatter. They're trying to chase my Blood Knights, but I instantly move in my Spearmen to try to contain this flank. Even this flank is about to shatter. And my Blood Knights have free reign of the enemy's rear now. All throughout this fight, though, he will have units that do return, because many of these are still kind of healthy, but they're just so far from the engagement, and he either forgets them or just ignores them. Here I do get another rear charge into Spearman. His Damsel just doing a lot of damage in general. Another thing I am doing during this engagement is that I keep on spamming zombies right inside of his blob here, just to make it more sticky, so that he can't just move units out of support here to try to chase away my swordsmen, my Blood Knights, without them actually taking hit point damage. We have another bounce charge. You might notice that over half of his army is flashing. We did see the Grail Knights return over here, but they were just too weak to even get into melee with my units. Their leadership just way too low. I am pretty consistent with my invocation of Nehek heals as well. I must say that he does use Earth Blood quite well also. By this time we're also seeing that the Grail Guardians over here are shattering slowly. This essentially means that, yeah, they are shattered, or I mean broken. He has no infantry left. The only unit left in the main engagement is this Grail Guardian and his Lord and Damsel. He is healing them. But, yeah. And now I charge in again. And now that all of my units are clumped up, I'm just going to nail a perfectly positioned... Wait for it. Wait for it. Here we go. Perfectly positioned invocation of Nehek, making sure that most of my units will be very healthy if he decides to pull back any of all of these routing troops. Yeah, and there we have it. My opponent's morale was broken, and he decided to surrender, maybe a bit prematurely, but we will get to that. As for the statistics, well, he did have a pretty healthy Lord left and a very healthy Damsel. I mean, most of his units had a lot of hit points left, but he did really fall into that relic trap. If he had brought that relic, maybe they wouldn't have shattered that much, maybe they wouldn't have lost that much hit points. You might say it was prematurely, but compared to what I still had left and how healthy those units were, I would at least try to claim that it's close to impossible to make a comeback from that. He really needed that immunity to psychology and the extra leadership the relic brings. On top of that, I really do think that those two Guardians would have been better used as Grail Knights. But let's look at the statistics then. Both Vlad and my White King were just generally in the melee, just performing what they do, providing additional leadership and, in Vlad's case, throwing out spells. I'm amazed at how well my spear line did, considering what targets they were facing. Especially these two, 49 and 48 kills on spearmen, that's insane. The Grave Guards were mainly there to hold. Sternsmen 81 kills. That's insane. I mean, I keep telling you, the Sternsmen, that's essentially the best unit in the game. You can quote me on that. Blood Knights, I did get in those rear charges. I was controlling the rear of my enemy very well, very good performance. You might say that my Crypt Horrors did underperform, but you need to realize here, I never got to their intended target. The perfect target for these guys are the Foot Squires. They would eat them for lunch. But I never got the chance to actually charge them into any. Instead, I got a bit of a harder target to swallow. I did get into the Grail Guardians instead. So if you consider that these kills are from AoE hits on large creatures, on cavalry, that's still pretty okay. Okay, let's look at All Might's army. Albrecht was jumping around his whole army, trying to provide support. Did get a few kills in return. Can't really say much about it. The damsel was continuously spamming Earthblood, which was good. But my suggestion here would actually be to drop Regrowth. Regrowth is very powerful, but it's also very expensive. Especially considering that he has a very wide army. My recommendation would have been to drop Regrowth and bring Awakening of the Woods instead. Awakening of the Woods do deal a slight bit of damage, and they do slow substantially. And for 10 seconds after using it, Life Bloom will kick in and heal his whole army for 10 seconds, which is also very important for him, because that would have kept his whole line a lot more healthy. Imagine if he had used Awakening of the Woods on one of my Blood Knights in the beginning of the fight, preventing me from supporting the other Blood Knight, and maybe would have destroyed one of them. And if he did that, I would have never been able to get those rear charges in. It would have changed the whole dynamic of the combat. His whole main line performed like you would expect from a chain routing army, and very few kills in general. These two units did get a few more, but that's generally because they were up against crap like Spearmen. Don't be fooled by the Foot Squire's kills. Like I mentioned, I did continuously summon zombies straight into the enemy's center line, just to make it more sticky. So these kills are essentially only from zombies. I turned off the Grail Knights very early. They did get in some kills on Spearmen and Blood Knights, but they are very far from paying from themselves. They need a unit of support of some kind, either another Grail Knight or dedicated Spearmen just helping them out. And as for the Grail Guardians, they are so overpriced and hard to actually get any return from. Another suggestion from my side here would have been to drop both Grail Guardians and either bring more Grail Knights, or maybe even Questing Knights, because Questing Knights would have performed the same role All Might wanted these to do, but for cheaper, and they would probably get even more kills. Well, that's that. Thank you for watching, and hopefully I'll upload something soon.